freedom. Leviticus 25. Leviticus 25, Sabbath of the 7th year. On the 7th year, that's when you rest. There will be no sowing for 6 years. There will be no you will sow for 6 years. You will prune for 6 years. But on the 7th year, you're going to rest. And you're going to live off the produce, but not the increase. The increase of the produce is not to be touched. So there's an order to this. We're going to live off the produce, but not the increase, because the increase is going to be used for something else later. The year Jubilee, that's something I've always learned about, and I always enjoyed learning that in 50 years, everything comes back to a person, back to the family, back to position. If you're in a bond servant or in slavery, you go back to your family and everything. During that time, increase and decrease of sales are not to oppress. And that's something we need to really consider, is that we're not trying to oppress people when we go up in taxes and do certain things and go up in the price of items. Because if you're paying everything off in your company and you still making $160 billion, then you're oppressing people. Because with that $160 billion, everybody's got a house, car, and a little bit of property, and you got $160 billion, you could be helping some people. Because that's oppression. You're taking a situation and oppressing others for your rich, so you can stay rich. And God said, don't do that. Do it fairly, so everybody can make it, so everybody can be successful. Provision for the 7th year. He's in the 6th year. He's going to make sure that you make as three times as much. So you need to understand, if you're making 3 times as much in the 6th year, you're really working hard. You're really working hard. But God is having that happen because He knows the 7th year you're going to rest. And what's going to happen is you're going to live off the produce, not the increase. The increase is going to be for later. And right now you're going to live off what God is giving you. Doesn't that sound like a 401k? Come on now. Okay, redemption of property. Is set up that a person or your kindred can buy back the property, okay? Or it can get back to you in Jubilee. All this is about property and getting back your provisions. And slavery is not of God. I don't believe slavery is of God. If it was of God, He would have kept the Israelites in slavery. Slavery is not of God. God has allowed us back in those days to allow people to put themselves into servitude so they can get paid or have a place to live and things like that. But slavery is not of God. He did not make it where you just take over people's lives and put them in some type of slavery. Again, if so, then the Israelites would never be out of it. They would still be in slavery. Lending to the poor. I like this one. If one of your brethren become poor and falls into poverty among you, then you shall keep him, and he shall live with you. And that's old school stuff. It used to be if someone in your family got into a situation, you brought them in, or you sent them back to home to live with the grandparents or the aunties or whatever, so they can get back on their feet. We don't want to do stuff like that anymore. And because of that, we have all kind of situations going on because we don't care for one another, like the Lord says we are to care for one another. You know, are you my brother's keeper? Yes, you are my brother's keeper. Yes, we are our brother's keepers. The law concerning slavery. If you poor, you sell yourself. You're not a slave, but you're a hired servant. That's what you call a hired servant. When you pour and you sell yourself into somebody, you become a hired servant. That's because you're living there and you're living off the provision of the people, and they're to treat you that's what the Bible says. Yeah, and your masters or the people over you are to treat you well. Is a way that when you're a hired servant, how you're supposed to be treated, and it's supposed to be well, but they are God's and not to be slaves. God's people cannot be slaves. You can be a hired servant, but you can't be a slave. Okay? From all around, you can make others slaves, permanent, but not your brethren. And again, a slave is somebody who puts themselves into a position. You just don't take them, but they want to be in that position because of whatever their situation may be. That would say all the people around you can be in that position of slavery because they can put themselves into slavery. But the people of God become higher servants. So we're not into slavery anymore. People put themselves out there, to do things in a different way. Just like I was saying, on the seventh day, on the seventh year, you have to rest. Well, that sounds like a 401k, right? You work for in the 6 years like a mad dog, and you run around chasing your tail forever, forever, ever, so that you can sit down in the seventh year and rest, and you make enough for the next 3 years. God is a God of greater. He's always trying to find a way to make things greater and better. And again, because it does talk about slavery. Slavery is a person who wants to say, "I want to be a part of this uh, company or organization and work as a person for you, and I will give my whole life to you." But you know who we are slave to? You know who we are? Who our master is as Christian is God. That's who we serve. That's who we've given our lives to. But again, slavery. If you give it's a agreement of two people saying, this is what I'm going to do to have certain things in my life, and to do certain things in my life. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give myself, not you take my life. Again, if that was true, the Israelites could have stayed where they were. They was in slavery. They was in bondage. It wasn't what they wanted, but that's where they were. God's not about that. There's a way God puts people in. God says that you put yourself into slavery, into bondage, into a higher hand. You decide that. So let's just keep that in mind when we think about slavery. Read that chapter so you can understand that it's not. It's just You just don't take someone's life. Okay. Well, that's my time. Stay free.